The Black Inventory, what the museum hid below. Every national museum has rooms the public never sees. Not the gift shop storerooms, not the bright conservation labs, not the offices where curators drink coffee over cracked folders and missing signatures. I mean the deeper rooms, the cold rooms, the rooms below the rooms, the kind with concrete walls that sweat in summer, the kind with metal doors that close with a heavy sound, as if they are trying to keep something in, not keep people out. I learned that on a Thursday in late October. Just before closing, my supervisor called me into her office and asked if I was comfortable working after hours. Her name was Miriam Sadeh. She was one of those people who always looked arranged, even at the end of a long day. Grey hair pinned tight, desk perfectly neat, voice low and careful, as if every sentence had already been checked for damage before she let it leave her mouth. She did not ask if I believed in curses. She asked if I had experience with restricted collections. I told her yes. War archives, private estate papers, religious manuscripts with handling rules. I knew how to photograph fragile material, how to log damage, how to record stains, repairs, marks, and hidden notes. She listened without blinking. Then she said, very quietly, "This is not exactly that." She pushed a brown folder across her desk. No museum seal, no department label. Inside was 6 pages, a project memo, a confidentiality form, a list of object numbers with no descriptions. And on the last page, typed in plain black letters, 2026 Restricted Digitization Review. I remember a small, tight feeling in my chest. Not fear, not yet. Just that uneasy excitement you feel when you realize you are being invited closer to something hidden. "You were recommended because you are careful," Miriam said, "and because you are not dramatic." I almost smiled. I signed the form. She put it away without reading it. Then she said, "Come downstairs at 7. Use the staff elevator by the conservation wing. And do not bring your phone." I asked why. She said, "There is no signal down there." It should have sounded ordinary. It did not. The museum, after closing, was already a strange place. The human sound went first, then the warmth. During the day, the building felt grand. At night, it felt hollow. The marble floors returned every footstep. Glass cases reflected empty corridors instead of faces. Paintings became dark shapes in darker rooms. Doorways looked deeper than they should. At 10 minutes to 7, I locked my office, left my phone in the drawer, and walked to the conservation wing. The elevator there was older than the public ones. Narrow, brass corners are worn dull. A smell of machine oil, dust, and old metal. There was no button for the lower level, only a key slot. Miriam was already waiting. She inserted a key, turned it and pressed a blank metal circle below B2. The doors shut. The elevator descended. One floor, then another, then lower. Far lower than I thought the museum went. The air changed first. It became cooler, but not the clean cold of climate control. This was damp, mineral cold. Cellar cold. Tunnel cold. I could smell concrete, old paper glue, a little mildew, and beneath it all something bitter, like candles that had been blown out hours ago. When the doors opened, I saw a corridor lined with painted cinder block and grey steel doors. The lights overhead hummed softly, but between them were pockets of shadow that looked too thick. No windows, no voices. Only the dry rattle of the ventilation system, and, somewhere far away, one dull metallic knock. Not loud, just one knock. Then silence again. Miriam stepped out. I followed. The floor was sealed concrete, pale and old. On the wall beside the elevator, someone had painted a number in black. Level 4. I did not ask how many levels were below the museum. I did not want to know. At the end of the corridor, a security guard sat behind a pane of wired glass. He was older, with deep lines around the mouth, and eyes so tired they looked bruised. He signed us through without speaking. But as I passed the desk, I noticed two things. The first was a small mezuzah nailed beside the door frame. The second was the smell. It was coming from somewhere behind him. A dry, sour smell, like old cloth shut in a trunk for too many years. He looked at me only once, and in that one look I saw something I did not expect to see in a museum employee. Pity. The restricted storage rooms were not what I expected. I had imagined order, uniform boxes, bright labels, calm, professional silence. Some of it was like that. Shelves, barcodes, acid-free containers, humidity monitors blinking green. But there were other things too. Locked cages inside rooms, black cloth draped over tall shapes, wax seals on cabinet doors, handwritten warnings taped beside printed protocols. One crate had a ring of white chalk around it, redrawn so many times it had soaked into the floor. No one explained any of this. The staff downstairs spoke softly. They moved carefully. Not gently, carefully, as though the place had trained caution directly into their muscles. One woman logged our arrival and would not meet my eyes. A technician passed us carrying a tray of silica packets and something wrapped in dark linen. He held it away from his body as if it might stain him. Miriam led me through a frosted glass door into a long workroom lined with compact shelving. "This is where you will work," she said. In the middle of the room stood a photography table with lights, calibration cards, gloves, folders, and a museum laptop already signed in. Beside it was a cart. On the cart were 6 object files and one old book. It was large, thick, bound in black leather so cracked it looked almost burned. No title on the spine, no inventory tag, no barcode. It sat there by itself. And although the room was cool, I could smell it from several feet away. Dust, mildew, old leather, and that same bitter, dead smell I had noticed in the corridor. "Your instructions are in the files," Miriam said. She pointed to the gloves. "Photograph each object, check the condition, prepare it for review. Nothing leaves this room unless I approve it. Nothing is opened unless the file tells you to open it." I nodded, but my eyes had gone back to the old black book. Miriam saw that. For the first time that evening, her face changed. Only slightly. A little tightening around the mouth. "That is not part of your assignment," she said. "What is it?" "A historical inventory." "Of this collection?" A pause. Too long. Then she said, "It is old. It is incomplete. And it has caused confusion in the past. Do not use it." I looked at it again. There was almost no dust on it. Much less than on the shelves around it. As if someone had touched it recently. Miriam stepped closer. "Do your work," she said. "Follow the files. Leave that alone." Then she left. The door shut behind her with a soft click. I stood there alone, listening to the ventilation breathe overhead. The old book sat on the cart. The lights buzzed. And from somewhere beyond the shelving, from some deeper part of that underground maze, I thought I heard a light tapping sound, like a fingernail touching glass. Once, twice, then nothing. I told myself it was the building settling. Pipes. Metal. Old air. I put on the gloves and opened the first file. The first object was a carved wooden figure about the length of my hand, packed in custom foam. The record said, "Provenance uncertain. Acquired from a military intermediary, 1948. Origin disputed. Condition stable." Then a note underneath. "Not to be displayed. Not to be loaned. Dual staff presence is preferred during handling." No reason given. The figure itself was ugly in the way some old ritual objects become ugly after too many hands. Grease dark in the grooves. The nose was worn flat. One eye inlaid with something pale that caught the light too sharply. I placed it on the table and began photographing it. And almost immediately, I felt it. That sense that someone was standing just behind my left shoulder. Not touching me, just there. You know that feeling. The instant awareness of another body where none should be. I turned. Nothing. Shelves. Drawers. The black book on the cart. I went back to work. A minute later, the feeling returned. Closer this time. I turned again. Still nothing. When I looked back at the cart, the black book was slightly open. Only slightly. A narrow black gap between the cover and the pages. I was certain it had been closed. I was certain. I walked toward it slowly. The leather made a faint crack as I lifted the cover. Inside were thick, yellowed pages lined by hand, entries in several inks, several styles of handwriting. Some are neat and professional, some hurried, some so faded they were barely visible. Dates ran back more than a century. Inventory numbers, descriptions, transfer notes, handling instructions. And in the margins, dense handwritten comments, some crossed out so hard the paper had almost torn. I read the first clear entry I found. Item 32, small morning cabinet with twin doors, oak, interior lined with prayer slips, removed from estate storage pending ministerial order. That meant nothing by itself. Then I read the darker line beneath it. Opened against instruction on the 14th of March. Handler reported a woman crying from within, though the cabinet was found empty. 2 days later, his wife was discovered wandering the rail yard, barefoot and mute. Cabinet sealed again. Do not transport during rain. I read it twice. Then a third time. The room changed. Not visibly, sensibly. The air thickened. The hair at the back of my neck lifted. A wave of smell rolled off the page so strong I almost gagged. Old wood, cold ash, and beneath it, the sweet, rotten smell of flowers left too long in standing water. I shut the book at once. The sound echoed harder than it should have. Then the overhead lights flickered. Just once. But in that brief, dim pulse, I saw something on the laptop's black screen. A shape standing at the far end of the room between two shelves. Tall, narrow, still. I turned. There was nothing there. I should have left then. I know that. But nothing had truly happened. Not enough to explain, not enough to report, not enough to make myself look sane if I tried. And the truth is, curiosity had already begun to tangle itself with fear. So I stayed. I photographed the first object, then the second, then the third. A bronze amulet sealed inside acrylic. A cracked ceremonial bowl was repaired with a dark resin that looked too much like dried blood. A necklace of black beads with a note attached. Store separately. Count after every movement. That note bothered me. Not inspect. Not a photograph. Count. As if the number itself might change. Time felt strange underground. No phone, no windows, no weather, no sense of the outside world. Only the clock on the laptop and the ache in my back. At some point, someone left tea outside the door without knocking. I did not drink it. It smelled faintly of cardamom and something bitter. Around 11, Miriam returned. She checked my files in silence, then looked at the black book. "Did you touch it?" It took me one heartbeat too long to answer. Yes. She closed her eyes. Not in anger, in tired resignation. "I told you not to. I only opened it for a moment. That is usually enough." I felt a cold pressure in my stomach. "What is this place really for?" I asked. She looked around the room before answering, as if checking whether the shelves themselves were listening. "Officially, restricted cultural holdings pending legal, ethical, or conservation review. And unofficially?" She held my gaze. "Objects with histories people prefer not to test." That was not really an answer. Or maybe it was exactly the answer, and I did not want it to be. She pulled out a chair and sat across from me. "Do you know why some things never go on display?" she asked. "Fragility, ownership disputes, political problems." "Yes. And sometimes, because every time they are moved, someone gets hurt." I said nothing. She continued. "Not always in dramatic ways. That is what people get wrong. They expect bleeding walls, madness, screaming. Most of the time it is smaller. A fall on the stairs, a burst artery, a fire with no clear source. A courier's child suddenly becomes ill. A conservator smelling smoke for weeks and then walking into traffic while looking for it. Patterns. Repeated patterns. And you believe this? I believe institutions pretend to be rational right up until they develop private rituals. Then I pay attention. She reached into her pocket, took out a folded black cloth, and covered the book with it. The gesture was practiced. That frightened me more than anything else. Before leaving, she paused in the doorway. "Do not read names if you see them," she said. Then she left. Do not read names. I repeated that sentence to myself for the next hour. It did not help. Around midnight, the ventilation changed pitch. The lights dimmed slightly. Somewhere far away, a door slammed. Then I smelled it again, stronger than before. Rotting lilies, wet soil, old perfume. It filled the room from nowhere. My eyes watered. I looked at the black cloth covering the book. One corner had darkened, as if moisture was slowly spreading beneath it. Then I heard footsteps outside the room. Soft footsteps. More than one person. Slow, unhurried, passing down the corridor in silence. I went to the door and opened it. The corridor was empty. The lights were steady. Nothing moved. But on the concrete floor outside the threshold, I saw a footprint. Bare, small, damp and grey. Then another. Then another. A line of wet footprints crossed the corridor and ended at the wall opposite the door. Not turned, not faded. They simply stopped at the wall, as if whoever made them had walked directly into it. I stared until a cold shiver moved all the way down my spine. When I turned back into the room, I knew before I looked. The cloth had slipped from the book. It was open again. This time, I told myself I would only confirm one thing. Only one. I would check whether the names actually appeared. That was all. The pages were colder than before. The paper felt thick and faintly damp, as if the book had been kept somewhere underground and wet for a very long time. I turned deeper into it. The entries grew stranger. A handler reported breathing from the case. Do not inventory after sunset. The assistant saw their own face reflected in the mirror before entering the room, though they had not yet arrived. Rabbi consulted, refused further involvement. Transferred under escort. Escort leader dead before dawn. I kept turning. I should have stopped. Then I found a newer page. At the top, in darker ink, were the words, Temporary Review, Black Inventory Annex. My pulse quickened. Several recent names were listed there. Miriam, a technician I recognised. A conservator I had seen once in the hallway. Beside each name was a date. Nothing else. Then halfway down the page, I saw mine. Written in fresh black ink. Fresh enough that it still held a faint shine. Levin, Daniel, assigned review access, level 4, has opened the book. Watches reflections, likely to continue. I cannot fully describe what it feels like to see your own name written somewhere it should not exist. It is not simple fear. It is a kind of inward collapse, as if the room suddenly moves closer in every direction, as if all the air around you has gone stale at once. I slammed the book shut. At that exact moment, something hit metal behind me. Hard. Then another bang. Then a rapid clattering from the shelving, as if several objects had begun to shake inside their cases all at once. I stumbled back from the cart. The lights overhead flickered violently. The room dimmed. And in that pulsing half-light, I saw movement between the shelves. Not one figure, several. Dark shapes sliding at the edge of sight. Too thin, too still, watching. The smell hit next. Wet flowers, smoke. And underneath it something rank and animal, like fur left in floodwater. I backed toward the door. Then, from directly behind me, inches from my ear, a voice whispered my name. Not sharply, not loudly, softly, tenderly, as if it knew me. I ran. The corridor outside was empty, but the motion lights farther down the hall were switching on one by one. Not away from me, toward me. Click. A patch of light. Click. Another. Click. Closer. As if something moving through the dark was triggering them section by section. I pounded on the security glass until the guard opened the inner door. He took one look at my face and pulled me inside. He locked the door behind me immediately. "What is down here?" I said. He poured water into a paper cup and pushed it toward me. My hands shook too badly to drink. "What is down here?" I asked again. He sat back. Under the fluorescent light, his face looked grey. "History," he said. "That is not funny. I am not joking." He glanced toward the corridor. "There are things people stole and things people saved. Things taken from fires, things taken from graves. Things were taken because men in uniforms wanted trophies. Upstairs they say collection. Down here, some of it is closer to evidence." "Evidence of what?" He gave a tired shrug. "That people do not always bring home what they take." He asked whether I had read the book. I said yes. He nodded once. "They should have locked it years ago," he said. "Or burned it." "Then why didn't they?" He looked at me for a long moment. "Because nobody trusts what would happen if they did." A few minutes later, Miriam arrived, breathing harder than I had ever seen. She took me into a small office off the corridor and closed the door. "You read your entry," she said. I nodded. She opened a drawer and took out a thin, overused file. Inside were black and white photos. Crates. Police escorts. An underground room. A line of officials standing too close together, all of them trying not to look frightened. "A private collection was absorbed into state holdings in 1973, she said. Objects from several sources. Some legal, some not. One archivist kept them together in a separate list until their origins could be cleaned up. Instead, incidents began clustering around the list." "What kind of incidents?" "Deaths, illness, missing files, staff breakdowns, a suicide in the loading bay. A child who visited her father's office and came home speaking a language no one in the family knew." I stared at her. At first, they thought it was a suggestion. Fear was spreading through the staff, stories growing in the dark. Then names began appearing before assignments were finalized. My mouth had gone dry. "And you kept it?" "We tried moving it. It came back. We locked it in a cabinet. The cabinet was found open. We sent it to off-site storage. The truck driver died on the road, and the book was back here the next morning." She looked at me with exhausted pity. "The wrong question is what it wants," she said. "Then what is the right question?" She answered very quietly. "Why does it keep needing witnesses?" Outside the office, something scraped softly along the corridor wall. Not nails, not metal. Something softer, like a wet cloth being dragged. Miriam heard it too. "We do not stay after 1, she said. And suddenly I understood. Because after 1, something changed. Because every old place has an hour when it stops pretending to belong entirely to the living.
We should have left immediately. Instead, Miriam said one thing had to be done first. "The book cannot remain open," she said, "and the page must be checked." We went back together. The corridor was colder now. The air stung inside my nose. Far away, I could hear a soft, repetitive tapping, like a cane striking the floor at regular intervals. The workroom looked unchanged. At first. The lamp still burned, the files were stacked neatly, the cart stood where I had left it. But the chair I had been using was no longer near the table. It stood in the far corner, facing the wall. Neither of us spoke. Miriam crossed the room, untied the black ribbon, and opened the cover. The page with my name was still there, but now there was another line beneath it. I saw her face go flat as she read it. "What does it say?" I asked. She did not answer. I stepped beside her and read it myself. "Has heard the voice at close range. Do not leave him with reflective surfaces." A cold pulse went through my whole body. The room contained several reflective surfaces. The laptop screen, the lens cover, the metal edge of the cabinet, the dark emergency panel by the door. My eyes moved to that last one, and in it I saw movement. Not behind me, inside the reflection. A face emerging slowly from the reflected room. Pale, wet-haired, eyes open too wide. Its mouth moved before I heard the sound. A low, broken whisper. Then Miriam grabbed my shoulder and pulled me away, hard. "Do not look at it." At once, the whisper rose into a thin, furious hiss from all around us. The lights began flickering wildly. Something heavy crashed into the shelves behind us. Glass shattered. The smell exploded through the room. Rot, perfume, wet ash, and something coppery underneath. Miriam slammed the book shut and wrapped it with shaking hands. "Go," she said. We ran. Behind us came the sound of objects moving. Not falling, moving. Wood scraping, crates thudding across metal shelves, beads rattling. And beneath it all, one sound I will never forget. Breathing. Deep, crowded, as if the room behind us was suddenly full of people standing shoulder to shoulder in the dark. We reached the security station just as the motion lights behind us began switching off one by one, swallowing the corridor section by section. The guard was already holding the key. "Now," he snapped. We got inside. He locked the barrier. For 5 seconds, nothing happened. Then something touched the wired glass from the other side. Not a hand. A shape at hand height, pressing just enough to make the mesh tremble. Then another. Then, higher up, the blurred shape of a face leaned close enough to fog the glass from the outside. No features. Only 2 dark hollows where eyes should have been. The guard began praying aloud. Not calmly, desperately. Miriam stood perfectly still, one hand on the wrapped book, as if her palm alone could keep it from breathing. At 1:07, the pressure on the glass vanished. The fog faded. The corridor beyond the station returned to empty fluorescent silence. Only one damp mark remained on the floor outside. A long grey smear, as though something wet had been dragged away. The next morning, I was told the project was suspended. Officially, it was under review. I was sent home with instructions not to discuss the basement, not to access related files, and not to answer questions from journalists if anyone somehow heard rumours. I went home and slept 14 hours with the lights on. When I woke, there was dirt on my sheets. Grey dust, tiny black flakes like burnt paper. I told myself it had come from my clothes. I told myself many things that week. None of them helped. The problem started with reflections. Not all reflections, only dark ones. Old mirrors, black windows at night, phone screens before they lit, the turned-off television in my living room. On those dark surfaces, I sometimes thought I saw someone standing slightly behind me. Not close enough to touch me, just close enough to lean nearer if I kept looking. So I stopped looking. Then came the smell. Not always, only in passing. Rotting flowers in an elevator, wet ash in a taxi, old perfume in my hallway at 3 a.m, strong enough to wake me from sleep. I began stuffing towels under the door. I do not know why. It changed nothing. 3 days later, Miriam asked me to meet her in a cafe across town. Daylight, crowded tables, normal noise. She looked 10 years older. "The book is gone," she said. My hands went cold around the coffee cup. "Gone where?" "We do not know. The room was locked. The cloth remained. The ribbon remained. The book did not." No one had seen it move. No security camera showed anyone carrying it. Only a brief failure in the corridor feed at 1:03. When the image returned, the cart was empty. I asked the question I had not wanted to ask. Did it leave because of me? Miriam did not answer directly. Instead, she passed me an envelope. Inside was a printout from the museum's internal pilot portal. At the top, in clean modern type, was a title, Black Inventory. Below it, Digital Access Copy, Pending Review. No image, no dimensions, no origin. At the bottom, one line. File generated automatically at 1:11. We had never scanned it. There should have been no file. I looked up at her. Around us, cups clinked. Someone laughed at another table. Sunlight hit the sugar jar between us. Everything looked painfully normal. "What happens now?" I asked. And Miriam gave me the only honest answer she had. "I think," she said quietly, "that whatever was kept in one place is no longer only in one place." I wish that were the end. It would be cleaner. A warning, an implication. The old thing is entering a modern system. but that is not where it ended. A month later, after I had almost convinced myself the worst had passed, I received an email from a museum address I did not recognize. No message, only an attachment. For several minutes I stared at it without opening it. The file name was simple: inventory_update.pdf. I should have deleted it. Instead, I opened it. The document had one page. White background, black text. No logo, no sender. At the top, black inventory. Below it is a new entry. No object number, no description. Only this: current housing is unstable. Witness remains in contact with reflective thresholds. Transfer incomplete. Further cataloguing required. And on the final line, please keep him where he can be seen. I dropped the laptop. The screen hit the floor and cracked. For 1 second, the broken glass reflected the ceiling light into a spiderweb of bright lines. And in the black spaces between them, I saw faces. More than one, crowded close together. Not looking at me, looking past me, toward the dark hallway behind where I stood. I turned. There was nothing there, nothing visible. Only the hallway, only shadow. Only the faint smell of wet flowers drifted out of the dark. I moved out 2 days later. Then again, 6 months after that, it made no difference. That is the thing about archives. People think they hold the dead still. They do not. They hold patterns. They hold unfinished ownership, broken prayers, stolen grief. Names attached to objects that should never have been taken. And if enough names are written down in the same place, enough fear bound to enough objects, sooner or later, the inventory stops being a record. It becomes a door. That is why I am telling this now. Not because I think it will save me. Not because confession breaks anything. I am telling it because stories like this are usually found too late, in notes left behind by people no one believed until belief no longer mattered. And because last week, on a public museum website I had sworn never to visit again, I found a broken, hidden page inside the digital collection search. No image, no data, no object description. Only a blank field where the photograph should have been. And beneath it, in plain black letters, there are now multiple copies. I closed the page. I unplugged the computer. I covered the mirror in my bedroom with a blanket. But tonight, while recording this, I can smell it again. Dust, wet ash, dead flowers in stale water. And from the dark screen beside me, every few minutes, I hear the faintest possible sound. Not a voice, not yet. Just the soft, dry whisper of a page turning by itself.